Hip, hip, hooray. It is another cult-free day, and it is Aloha Friday. If you're joining for the first time on a Friday, I love celebrating Aloha Friday like we do in Hawaii, which is basically a time to kind of reflect on the week, be thankful that we made it, and catch up with our friends. And each Friday when I do my live, it's Aloha Friday, and I do it as a Q&A. So you can go ahead and ask me anything. We can get to know each other better. If you're new to my channel, I'm Natalie, and this is Scientology Life After a Cult, where I share about my time growing up, being in Scientology for 35 years in the Sea Organization. I have 35 years of stories, so y'all better get comfortable. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And if you enjoy this video, would appreciate it if you would like it as well. And if you want to make sure you get the notifications for when I go live, make sure that you hit that notification bell as well. I even just figured that out because channels that I follow, I keep forgetting to hit the notification bell so that I get the notifications. So make sure you do that as well. So hello, aloha, welcome everybody. Love seeing everybody in the chat. Love seeing you here. Love seeing even people lurking. Nancy. Hi from New York, Veronica. Hey, Jean. This is so much fun. Your socks are off. That's good. Dip me in glitter. Already got the socks off. Nice and comfy. I've got the shoes off. I'm in my house sweatshirt, which you guys have seen a ton of times by now. Do you have that where you get home and you get into your comfy clothes? And I have more than one sweatshirt, but if this one is available and I can grab it and it's not horrific, I will grab it and put it on day after day. Tony actually grabs it, takes it from me. He'll go and take it when I'm not around to be able to throw it in the washer because I just want to I just want to wear it all the time. I don't know why. I need to find more that are like this. Hey, Brian, and not that Helen. Colts be Colton. Thank you for hitting that bell. I love that. Scrap Booker checking in from Nebraska. Destroying cults. I love that. Oh, Granny, nice to see you. You can't stay long, but I'm glad you stopped in to say hi. So, hello. Okay. So think about your questions and what you want to know about. But another thing I thought would be fun to do, since it is Aloha Friday and it's more chill and we're more laid back and you have your beverage of choice, it's about the only time you're going to catch me drinking anything during a live. I don't know why. You know what it is in part why I don't drink anything during a live? One, I come from a background in radio and you would never be allowed to do that. I mean, you would, but you'd have to like do it during commercial. So it feels weird to me to do while I'm doing a live. But Aloha Friday is way more laid back and kickback. So here we are. Thank you, Nancy, for the reminder to hit the like button. Hey, Black Male. Genshi, it's fun. I'm in the best mood. This is awesome. She says, I got and accepted a job offer today. First interviewed last March. Whoa. Worth the wait. Happy to be here with you all. Congratulations. That is really awesome. That is a good day. That is a really good day. That makes for a good week. Woohoo. Kelly's here for her first Aloha Friday. So hello to you as well. This is so great. This is fantastic. Ooh, destroying cults. You're set up. Wine on hand. This is live on the television. I love watching YouTube on the big screen. I really do. I think it's my favorite way of consuming content in my recliner because I am recliner people. In fact, I want to get a new recliner this year because now once I joined the recliner club, I was all in. I was all in on it. I love it. But I need to have one that doesn't look like I'm, like Fraser's dad. His recliner, it's not like that. It's actually kind of a nice one, but I'm wearing it out. So you got the TV set up, chat on the iPad, and me outside cooking a nice barbecue for the fam. Hit the like button. That is so cool. Must be warm where you are because I'm in Minnesota and it finally got cold. And of course it got cold today. And guess who forgot her coat? That'd be me. Normally, I keep one in the car because especially this time of year, you might be leaving the house and think you don't need it, and the temperature actually will drop and you need it. Lauren's asking, did you make any reports to police, the FBI, after leaving the cult? If so, what was that experience like? Congrats on freeing yourself and your family from the cult. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much. Let's see. I do not believe so. When I did leave, I did participate in a multi-series article and story that came out in the Tampa Bay Times about the coerced abortion issues in this organization. But no, not to the police or the FBI. Although if they came a calling, if there's something of value to share, I would definitely let them know. Would definitely do that. This is so great. Aloha from Middle Georgia. Can't stick around, but I'll catch it on the replay. Thanks, Rhonda. Thanks for stopping by. Rachel, do you think all celebs are secretly covert in Scientology, like it's the task for them to get cast members in, but like the cast of that 70s show is all in except Topher, but he could be too. So let's see. It sounds like you're asking if I think if celebs are secretly covertly in Scientology. Um, yeah, I mean, well, there are celebrities that I would say downplay it or don't talk about it publicly. Not often, but then if you're familiar with Scientology, church propaganda, and their magazines, you'll see them like Michael Pena. I've not heard him talk really much about Scientology, but I've seen him in some of the Church of Scientology literature, magazines and whatnot. Um, not all of them are like Tom Cruise where it's blah, 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 but even he learned his lesson. And now he is a bit quieter. Um, so yes, there are ones who are, more quiet about it. Yeah, and yes, they are tasked with getting other celebrities into Scientology. In fact, Leah Remini has shared about that and how that works with the president's office at Celebrity Center, which is where the celebrities go. So there is definitely there's definitely an expectation that they bring people into the church. Will and Jada for sure were. Cult be Colton. Will and Jada for sure were. Yeah, I'm not buying the, we were never Scientologists. We were just using L. Ron Hubbard study technology because you had to have known, what am I all hooked up in here? You had to have known that the school, that's all run by Scientologists and there's much more to it. So yeah, I mean, obviously they're gone. They're not in now. They never would have had Leah Remini on their show. Plus they probably realized too, like, wow, it is really bad PR to be associated with Scientology, so we should downplay for sure. Cornelius, what music do you like or love? Oh, that's a great question. Let's see, I have a couple playlists that's kind of a mix of things. I love acoustic music. I love Jack Johnson. I love listening to remixes too. I always forget how to ask for it on Spotify because I'll like hear some songs and think, oh, I love this playlist, and I can never remember how I got there. So I just yell at my car or yell at usually yell at Siri. Siri, play the music they mixed, but it's like dance music on Spotify. And of course she says, bitch, I don't know what you're talking about. But I find if I yell at Siri long enough, just pieces of what the kind of music I think I wanna listen to, she does come up with something. What I need to do is save some of these playlists I'm in my car when this is happening and I'm driving, which is why I'm yelling at her. Hey, my Tony, he's in the chat too. Aloha Friday. Thanks for joining, babe. Oh, yeah, C&K, Cecilio and Capono. Look them up. I'm now it's music from back in the day in the 70s from Hawaii, but they're some of my favorites. Cecilio, like how it sounds, and Capono, Kapono. Really like it. I actually introduced Tony to it, and he's hard to surprise with music because he's like listened to, I think, so much of it. Well, more than me because I was in the cult for so many years, and when I was in the SEA organization, we weren't just, like, hanging out listening to music. Destroying cults? Have you ever worked at a public Scientology company like ABC or Grant Cardone? No, no. Well, I mean, my I worked for my mom and my stepdad. They owned a company where they used Scientology technology administratively and otherwise. So I guess so. I mean, in that regard, it was my family's business, but it was definitely, I would have considered it a Scientology company at that time. But then when I had my third child, my son, after that, I stayed home with the kids for about 13, I think, years or so. Because with 3 at that point, it's like, daycare would have been ridiculous. Sandy's asking, "How did you get into radio?" This is actually an interesting story, or at least I think it is. So, I had a blog at the time, and I was also writing for a local publication. I had this column where I would, it was called Outside the Box. I'd find things around in the community that were outside my comfort zone, and I would do it, and I would write about it. And I started doing this right when I decided that I was gonna leave Scientology, but it took me 2 years to execute a plan to make sure my family came with me, as much as them as I could, and 3 generations of us did leave together. Um, when I left Scientology, I would listen to this station locally in the Twin Cities called My Talk, and their platform was, it's a pop culture platform. And, these specific hosts, Bradley and Colleen, all of them were pretty much, because this was when Tom Cruise was jumping on Oprah's couch and all that, the whole Katie Holmes thing. So Scientology was a hot topic, as was the abuses in Scientology, because that was coming out as well. Coming out again, I should say. And, I would call in because they would talk about Scientology, and I would just be like, "Hey, I recently left Scientology. What you said about this is true, but this part here actually is not." So, I kind of became their somewhat resident ex-Scientologist, so sometimes I would call in and be on the show, and, they became familiar with the other things that I was doing, and like I said, I went on the show a few times, and when a position opened up for a show on the weekend, it was Colleen and Bradley who recommended me for it. So I went in and had an interview, and she's like, "When can you start?" I found that people who worked at the station either had a background in radio, went to school for it, broadcasting and all that. And remember, this was a station where the format, it was a pop culture station. So a lot of celebrity gossip and things like that. And it's kind of funny because I mean, I really kind of fell into it. It wasn't even that much. It's like she was already gonna hire me for the show, and I was teamed up with a woman named Twyla Dang, who I absolutely adore, and she's doing amazing things today. She has a podcast network called Matriarch Digital Media with multiple podcasts on it that, primarily focus on women, which you could probably tell by the name, Matriarch Digital Media. So, yeah, that's how I got into it. I kind of fell into it. I was saying there's 2 different kinds of people I think who work in radio, people who were trained for it, went to school for it. That was not me. I was in the other group, which was pretty much the people who lacked boundaries, and there wasn't a speed bump between what they thought and what came out of their mouth. And turns out that that skill that was such a curse in ways in my life made me really good for radio. So, did that for a while. So hopefully that answers your question there. Yeah, Diane, you and Siri don't get along. I confuse her and Alexa. So I spend so much time just yelling for one of them, just hoping one of them answers. I'm such a I'm Generation X, so I should be a bit better with some of those things. But at the same time, I feel like I have boomer tendencies on a few things. I'm a little boomer leaning. I'll even sometimes forget Alexa's name. The hard drive of my brain can only hold so much. So if and I'm constantly learning new things. I'm staying on I work in real estate, so I'm constantly studying and reading and staying on top of all kinds, the market and all that. And so sometimes as I learn new things, some other thing disappears off the hard drive of my brain. And I'll just have a total brain fart and start yelling for, I mean to be speaking to Alexa, but I actually yell for Siri. Siri. So yeah, sometimes we get along, sometimes we don't. Cult be Colton, where has been your favorite place you've lived so far? Ooh, that's tough because ooh, you know, it's tough between Minnesota and Hawaii. I lived in California, I lived in Seattle, definitely was not those places. I love the seasons of Minnesota. There's change. Time goes by so fast here because there's constant change that you're seeing. And in Hawaii, sometimes it's rainier, sometimes it's a little cooler. Sometimes, but the biggest thing is what side of the island. I grew up on Oahu, and what side of the island did the you know are the waves the strongest? Because in the wintertime, it was like on the North Shore, but in the summertime, it would be on another part. So that would change, but that was about it. It was always 83, 85, and beautiful. And when it would rain, the rain would often move through so quickly because it's a small island in comparison to the vast ocean. Um, that yeah, there just wasn't as much change, but when I go back, it's so home to me still, even though I consider myself I've lived longer in Minnesota now than my time growing up in Hawaii. But there's something I'm still so connected to the land, which I think a lot of that has to do with being Hawaiian, that it just feels so much like home. And as much as I love Minnesota and Minnesota is my home, I don't get that same feeling. If I had to pick of anywhere else that I lived outside of Hawaii, definitely Minnesota. But would I move back to Hawaii? No. And I will tell you why. Well, mainly my family's here, my kids are here, my grandkids are here. I could, the other thing is it's super expensive. It's really expensive to live there. That's honestly a big part of it. And I love hanging out on the beach, but living in the humidity is not as bad as like I've had worse humidity in Minnesota than in Hawaii. And there's a trade wind, so it's comfortable. So it stays fairly comfortable, but I like I like sweaters and boots and it just feels cozier. So for living, but I would not turn down being able to live there part-time. I think for sure. I think that's for sure. Rachel, oh yeah, like Donna. Is that her last name? I did not know that, but I'm assuming you're talking about the Donna on My Talk as well. And Bradley too. I don't think he went to school for it either. Jilly, aloha. Esperanza, thank you. She said, I have a nice voice for radio. I so appreciate that because it's so not what I hear. I really, I don't. Somebody said my voice was relaxing, and I was like, really? I don't know if that's just a me thing or with other people. You don't. I just don't hear it that way. But it makes me very happy because I would hate to enjoy doing this as much as I do and, have my voice be irritating. Hopefully you'd still stick around. Cornelius, my hard drive is too big. Well, it can hold a lot of stuff. I feel like I don't know if it's because I'm 53 or what. That's why I try to unload a lot of the Scientology stuff so it doesn't take up as much room in the hard drive of my brain. But the more talking about it again, I've like gone back and looked at things and been like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." And then those memories start coming back again. Trailblazer Laura, where in Oahu did you grow up? I started out on the North Shore. In fact, my dad was one of the first lifeguards on the North Shore. He was a lifeguard at Waimea Bay for many years. Then I lived in different parts of the island. We moved a lot when I was with my mom. Even when she was married to my first stepdad, I lost track of how many schools I went to, but it was like, I think 7 different schools. And keep in mind, I only went to school till I was 15 and I lived on an island. So we moved a lot, but I ended up going to high school in Aiea, if you're familiar with the area. Hip hip hooray, Trailblazer Laura. I love that. Oh, yeah, Tony's right. Oh, good, babe. Thanks for typing out the Sicilio and Capono. He's gotta check it out. Check it out. If you like, it's from the '70s. I mean, one of them, Henry Capono, he has some new stuff, but I like his older stuff better. I do. Dip Me in Glitter, do you struggle with anything PTSD related or have flashbacks to Scientology? These days, I wouldn't say there was a time where I would have said yes on the PTSD. But like just really the last couple of years, the nightmares have gotten way less. They're really more far and few between. Once in a while, I'll get one. But I do have flashbacks to Scientology. I do have moments where something will trigger something and I'll feel that anxiety in my chest. I usually feel it right here. And that's when I just kind of like, okay, take a step back, look around and like, all right, remind myself of where I am now. I just try to be more present. And if it triggers something, a specific memory, I used to just push it away, push it away, push it away. Now I try to look at it and go, "Oh, okay, so what was it?" And, just it kind of just let myself experience it, if that makes sense, not just shut it off. And I gotta tell you, being able to talk about it and talk about Scientology so freely on YouTube has been I can't tell you how much I feel even less of that, the anxiety about it or something being truly triggering. I've been out of Scientology for 13 years, but it took me a good solid decade to get where I was like 10, 11 years where I just felt more like, okay, I don't feel so much like I have PTSD from it. But things sometimes do get triggered and I got to like, remind myself, especially if I feel like I have a fairly long fuse. I spent so much time in Scientology being miserable, upset, depressed, angry, so much just feelings of anger because there's so much you can't communicate and resentment. And I carried that around for so long that once I got into a better mindset myself, I had decided I don't want to spend any more time on that. I don't want to lose another day to some BS. So if something's going on and I can not, just kind of like manage. I don't know. When you've been through some of the worst things already, then other things happen, but they're not as bad at what happened before. That it's like, oh, well, this is fine. I can handle this. Like a normal work week after being in the C organization, a 40-hour work week is a vacation. It really, really is. So hopefully that answers that though. Let's see. Do you think any Scientology celebs are on Epstein's list? I can't find the real full list and need to know who not to support anymore. I think Scientologists, just like any other person, are susceptible or have issues like that. So I wouldn't be surprised. But it's such a small pool at the same time. When you think of all the celebrities there are or all the well-known people, there really aren't that many that are Scientologists. So who knows? But that kind of stuff has happened in Scientology as well. Um, Danny Masterson. And what did the Church of Scientology do? They covered it up, but not before blaming the victims, which is completely how they address these things. When I had something like that happen to me, that's what they did. Cover it up. It was your fault, and you're expected to move on from it and not deal with it in any way at all. I didn't deal with it for 20 years. Um, I didn't even tell my own mom for 20 years. I told her when we were leaving Scientology. How did you get started in real estate? I was doing kind of like working more on, well, actually, it started when I was doing like social media consulting. This was like some years ago. And I just ended up gravitating towards people in that industry. So painting contractors, builders, developers, other real estate agents. So I was doing a lot of work and digital marketing for them. And one particular client asked me to help out with an event that they were doing on this gorgeous property on Lake Minnetonka, which is the most popular recreational lake in Minnesota. And I work like right across the street from it. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll love to help with that." What a great way to kinda meet people too who are interested in the properties and just kinda get firsthand some information. And, like, that was my gateway drug to real estate. I enjoyed it. Then he's like, "Hey, would you wanna do, like, a parade of homes?" This was really high-end lakeshore property. It was gorgeous. I loved being in the house. I was like, "Yeah, why not?" I'd never even been to the parade of homes. And I got more involved and had a couple people, the developer I worked for included, tell me that I was stupid if I didn't get my license because I was already doing half the work because I was doing all of the marketing and whatnot. And that is how I got into it. And I love it. I love the whole idea of helping people get connected within their community. The house is the house. Of course, it needs to be a house that suits your needs, but so often the conversations become more about where am I gonna shop? Where am I gonna make friends? Where am I gonna meet people? Where are my kids gonna meet people? Just helping to get people more connected within their community. I love that part of it. Um, and I really enjoy advocating for people. It's been a way to be able to utilize those skills too, because you advocate for your client, you represent them. And I like doing that for people. I like being able to advocate for them in that way. And so it was really I think I enjoy it. I can't see never doing it. And I've learned more about the development side, and I'm involved in a development project, and there's just every deal is completely different, and I like that too. You have 2 choices in life, live in the past or move forward. Yes, me and Taz, you are exactly right. Exactly. Oh, that's interesting, Cornelius. So in the Netherlands, you can have a 36-hour work week and it will be regarded as a full-time job. That is so awesome. That would be great. I mean, if that would work here. I don't know, but maybe. Do you behave with people in a contractual sometimes way, even in tiny things? Contractual. Can you tell me, Beehive, a little bit what you mean by contractual? Do you mean kind of like in a just real factual, like just very factually? You'll have to tell me a little bit more or clarify a little bit more. Um, but I mean, yeah, I think there are many times when if you mean kind of like in a well, you know what? I don't know what you mean. So I before I get too far down that rabbit hole, Um, tell me, Beehive, if you can kinda just elaborate on that a little bit more and let me know kinda like in what way, and I'll be happy to absolutely happy to answer that. And again, just a reminder, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you're enjoying the video, to like it as well. I'm getting so much better at remembering to do that, and in, um, in a huge way, thanks to reminders that people put in the chat. Oh, okay, so Beehive says permissions, acknowledgments. Um, I mean, definitely with acknowledgments, I need you to tell me a little bit more, I think. So do you mean like giving permission or needing permission? Needing permission, no. But I think that's in large part because I had been self-employed for such a long time that I was used to I play well with others. I work well with others. But in my line of work, you're not always having to seek permission for something so much, if that's what you mean. Um, definitely, I mean, acknowledgments, like I do like to be acknowledged. Cornelia says contractual or transactional, maybe. Um, maybe since I'm not totally understanding that, maybe not. I think I can be very matter of fact about a lot of things. Um, that I don't know, I think but I don't know if that if you mean that in that way, like contractually, or if you think like making agreements. I think I'm pretty there was a time where I was more stringent about stuff, but I have gotten so much more relaxed about things, let me tell you. And maybe sometimes I think even though the last couple years, like I said, I really have felt more in the driver's seat of my own life, which was always my goal when was when I was in Scientology, but not allowed. But when I got out of Scientology, that's more what I was striving for. And at the same time, the last 2 years have been some of the most difficult of my life, but at the same time, the most happiest in ways. Oh, good, Beehive, you answered. You get the picture. Yeah, and ask away again if there's a better way to for, you know, if there's a different angle on that or anything like that. And I've shared with you and some of you, but if you're new to my channel, you might not know this. My partner Tony went through cancer treatment. So he had surgery and we went through the treatment and he's still recovering from that. He's doing well. And he gets checked every 12 weeks now, which they'll continue to do because unfortunately he has an aggressive, rare form of prostate cancer, but he's doing great and continuing to get stronger. And I think for both of us, it was really a real humbling experience and it put so much in perspective. I already was like, I just want to be able to enjoy my life. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect, far from it. But I didn't want to, sometimes we choose how we're going to, do we want to go down the rabbit hole of feeling bad about something? Or do we want to, feel those emotions? But at the same time, like, okay, at some point you got to take a step back and what is my next step going to be? And with going through what we went through with Tony, it was each step we had to just take it one day at a time at times. And there's life just keeps going on and you still have responsibilities, but then there's so much more added into that, but it really helped to put things in perspective of what's important and how important time is. I think is kind of the biggest thing. So how do we want to spend our time? Where do we want to spend our time? I think that time is the biggest commodity that I have. And how do I want to spend that time was the big question. And if I want to enjoy myself, whether it's with my kids, my grandkids, friends, or with Tony, I want to be in a mindset of I'm there to enjoy it and enjoy their company. And sometimes you got to talk about things that aren't as pleasant or deal with issues that come up. But we often have a choice in the matter of are we going to let it be what defines us, just like with Scientology and growing up in a cult, was that going to be what fully defined me? Or could I just take what I'm getting out of it and figuring out life after? And that's what I try to do. Now, I don't always do it perfectly or even well, but for the most part. And I absolutely love, chatting with you guys as well and hearing your perspective on things. So definitely if you're catching this on the replay too, participate. Still go ahead and comment because I do read those comments and I love hearing what you guys have to say about this and what you think about it. I find it very helpful. And thank you, Cornelius. We'll wish you strength, Natalie. I appreciate that. I can really feel the well wishes and all that. It's just I appreciate it so much. If you could pick one rebellious moment of your life, what is your heck yes, I totally own this rebellious moment? Ooh, most rebellious that hmm. I mean, there's a couple of things. When I probably felt was like the most like rebellious was when, growing up in Scientology, things are very strict. And if you're in the C organization, they just work you so hard that you don't have the time or the energy to make the effort to rebel. That's why it's just easier to put your head down sometimes and just, keep going. Um, I really feel like I didn't do a lot of rebellion. I mean, I did some things as a teenager, especially being, I was on my own pretty much from the time I was between 15 and 16. I was in doing a training program in Los Angeles at 15, and then when I went back, I was kinda couch surfing, or sometimes I'd be with family, but from then on, pretty much on my own. And so it's probably not until I got out of Scientology, and I'll just tell you what's popping into my head, is when my mom died, she died 2 years after we left Scientology, and my sister and I had decided, I said, "You know what? My sister and I grew up in Hawaii, and I think we're the only 2 people to never try cannabis." 'Cause being raised in Scientology and then being in the Sea Organization and all this, is like, when are you gonna be doing that? It was so taboo, and plus it was not like today where, like, I live in a legal state now where cannabis is legal, and that's half the country. And so, when we were going to scatter my mom's ashes, I thought, "You know what? This'll be a great time to go back to Hawaii," and keep in mind, I'm, like, 42 years old. I think I was 42, 43, around there, and I'm like, "I'm gonna go back to Hawaii, and I'm gonna try cannabis for the first time," and it was something that would be so against the rules in Scientology, not because you weren't allowed to do it in Scientology, but that it's one thing if you did it before Scientology, but if you do it after you're in Scientology, they call it a drug reversion, or you're reverting back to drugs, and I thought, "Well, I never did it in the first place, so how can I revert back to it? I'm no longer in Scientology." It was one of those things that I just felt would really just, you know, solidify and be rebellious. And so, we were doing what's called a paddle out in Hawaii, where we went to the beach on the North Shore, not far from where my mom lived and where my dad lived, and we had surfboards, we had a local pastor that, my other sister knew come, and we go out into the water and you paddle out, and my friend James was there with us. He flew with me from Minnesota to Hawaii, and we opened up the Ziploc bag with my mom's ashes in it and then scattered them. Just It was just kind of funny because later on I realized that people actually, there are services that will take you out to do this, but didn't even occur to us. We're like, let's just get some boards, throw her in a Ziploc bag. The pastor gets on the board, we paddle out, he says a blessing, and we scatter the ashes. He did a Hawaiian blessing. And on the way back, we come out of the water, and we had put this little pop-up tent on the beach so that the pastor could find where we were on the beach, because we were on all beaches in Hawaii are public, but we were in a residential area. They're still public, but you have to enter from further down to get onto the beach. Then you can go anywhere you want, even if it's in front of somebody's house. So that's where we were. So we had this little pop-up tent there so that he knew where to find us. We come out of the water, because we're walking up and I see these people under the tent. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And we get closer and we can smell the marijuana, which, by the way, in Hawaii, here's your Hawaiian word of the day, by the way. Don't let me do another Aloha Friday without teaching you a Hawaiian word. I don't know the whole language. I just know some words. Pakalolo. That is the Hawaiian version, the Hawaiian word for marijuana or cannabis. So we smell the pakalolo, and we look under the tent, and there are these girls, young ladies, who were there, who were smoking, and then so I walk up to him and I'm like, "I'm 40," diarrhea of the mouth. I'm in my 40s, but I've never tried marijuana, and I really would like to try it." So I had some of theirs, and then I said, "Could you get us some of the marijuana?" I was, like, such a dork about it. I had no idea what I was doing, and they're like, "Yeah, we would sell you a joint." So I'm like, "Okay, so do we meet somewhere? Do you have it now? Just how does this all work, and how much does it cost?" And so we set up a time to meet again because it was back at the house they were staying at, and I go and I meet them on the beach at the time that we set up for, like, my first drug deal, and they totally ripped me off. It was $20 for this joint. I had no idea. She could have told me it was 50 bucks. I had absolutely no idea. So I get it. I go back to the house we're staying at, and, I didn't wanna my dad, this is my biological dad, he actually had a medical marijuana license and was a big cannabis user. And but I didn't want to do it initially with him. So long story short, well, now it's a long story. I go out on the balcony of where we were staying with a few people and who also had never done this before. We smoked, or no, one of them had, and we end up smoking this joint and getting so ridiculously high. I laughed so hard. I just laughed and laughed and laughed. I laughed so hard I completely peed my pants and couldn't stop laughing long enough to get myself out of the chair and back into the house. I was just stuck in the chair and all I could do is laugh and laugh and laugh. So this was my big rebellion about it. And what finally got us back in the house, because our friend James, who had traveled with us, was hanging out with another friend, a new friend we had just met on the beach, and they were hanging out. And I knew that he'd be coming back, and we hadn't really talked about this. And I was kind of embarrassed because I couldn't stop laughing. So we go ahead and but I'm like, we have to go back in the house, but I can't get out of my chair. I'm stuck there. So finally, what happens is my sister was she comes out and she says she thought she saw a rat running across the bushes, which could have been. And she's like, "There's a rat running across the bushes." And I jumped out of my chair and then ran in the house. Suddenly I could move. But yeah, so that was like that felt super rebellious after leaving Scientology. So yeah, I thought it was hilarious and kind of that was my big rebellion. Jessica got an email that says the protesters are squirrels, and Ellerate says if squirrels start screaming, it's a sign of success. What does that mean? Ah, okay. So, all right. So squirrels in Scientology are people who do a couple of things. You're either altering Scientology. So L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology, you do exactly what he says in the sequence that he says it. There's no altering it or making changes to it. So, and I use this example a lot. If he tells you, which he does, he wrote a policy on how to wash a car, how to wash clothes, you do that. This is in the C organization. And in the rest of Scientology, same thing. If he said how to do a particular procedure, you do it that way in that exact sequence. And if you don't do that, that's why they call you a squirrel. Or if you leave Scientology and you practice Scientology and you charge money for it, so you're a competition for the church, you're a squirrel, because they just say that, well, they're out there selling Scientology, but they're altering it. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So they're called squirrels. So in Scientology, they believe, because L. Hubbard says this, that when the squirrels start screaming, it's a sign of success. So when your enemies, right? So they tell their members that everyone standing outside the testing center on Hollywood Boulevard, like William from Scientology Audit Streets LA, and Jessica, and what's that other guy? Confident Chad, and a bunch of other people are out there with their phones videotaping. What the Scientologists are told is they tell them different things. They either tell them they're being paid by big pharma, they're being paid by the psychiatrists. They are but when that starts to happen, when people are attacking Scientology, who they then will call squirrels, that it's a sign that they're succeeding, they're winning. Scientology is doing so well, reaching so many people, that the haters are coming out. And that is not true. What they're doing is they're taking something that could have a little bit of truth to it. Like, for example, here on this channel, the majority of the comments I get are positive, the vast majority. There is a point where there's going to be some that aren't positive, and that's fine, because statistically that's just going to happen. Anything, not everybody loves the same type of chocolate, but a lot of people might, right? So there might people who come out and say what they don't like about what I do or something like that. And that's completely fine, because I don't think everybody should like the same thing. I don't take offense to that. But in Scientology, they take that idea because, right, if you're reaching enough people, there will eventually be someone who doesn't like what you're doing, regardless of what your job is or what, it could be over food, anything. But if you're reaching enough people, you're going to have a certain percentage of those people who are haters. So what they're trying to say is we're reaching so many people in Scientology, we're creating such big effects that the haters of Scientology can't stand it. So they get all worked up and riled up and do things like protest outside on Hollywood Boulevard at the test center, things like that. So Scientologists are told that these attacks, because they see them as attacks on Scientology, are because of how great we're doing. And they're all paid by psychiatrists or big pharma. That's what they tell people. They told people that about me years ago when I left, that one, they tried to say that I was running anonymous in the Twin Cities, which is ridiculous because nobody's running anonymous. Remember when anonymous 4chan, they were doing the whole protesting outside churches of Scientology all over the place. I was like, no, that's they just come up with these ridiculous reasons of why these people are doing these things rather than going, huh, maybe David Miscavige beating people and that getting out and the coerced abortions and using sleep deprivation and food deprivation, that seems to be upsetting people. Maybe, just maybe we shouldn't do that. That never occurs to them. That is not part of the conversation, but they have to tell the members something. So that's what they tell them that, oh, they identify, this is marketing. They position anybody attacking Scientology as a squirrel, which is Scientology language for somebody you have to stay away from. They can be worse than a suppressive person because you can be labeled a suppressive person in Scientology, but it doesn't mean that you're squirreling Scientology, that you're taking it and twisting it around and altering it what L. Ron Hubbard says. But a squirrel does do that. So when they say that, the squirrels are going crazy and are getting loud, that's what they mean. So then the Scientologists go, oh, okay, those people there they're squirrels. So that makes sense. That makes sense. These haters of Scientology, and they're being paid by pharmaceutical companies and psychiatrists. That's totally why they say that. Oh, Celine loves light. You love Henry Capono and you live in Quebec. That is super cool. It's nice to see some fans out there of his work. When we would go back to Oahu, Henry Capono would perform at what is it? The Outrigger at Duke's on Waikiki Beach. In fact, it's the only reason that I would go to Waikiki when we go back, because when we go back, we usually like to be on the North Shore. But we would catch him because he did a show every Sunday, Duke's on Sunday. And it's one of the favorite things for my family to do when we're there, or Tony and I will go ahead and do that. Oh, Celine, aloha, you're 70 years old. That is fantastic. I'm looking forward to being 70 because when I am, I will have been out of Scientology longer than the time I spent in Scientology. Susie loves her cannabis. $20 is normal for a pre-roll joint, Rachel says. Well, today, I guess this was like a decade ago. Yeah, we have legalization for recreational in Minnesota, but we don't have dispensaries open yet. In Minnesota, you can grow up to 8 plants in Minnesota. And we also have one of the lowest taxes for it. I think it's going to be like 10%. It's crazy. I've heard the legalization in Minnesota is very different from a lot of other states because the amounts people are allowed to grow, 8 plants, but only 4 can flower at one time, but you can have a pound of cannabis in your home. I mean, a pound of cannabis. It seems like a lot, but hey, that's what you get to do in Minnesota. Oh, Celine, you said you sent at Christmas a song on Instagram and you haven't opened it yet. I am the worst at the messages on the DMs on Instagram. I will go look. I wonder if it went into spam or something. My email is natalie@tonkatalk.com. You can reach me there too. So if it works out to send me a link, that might be a little bit easier. Oh my gosh, you guys are so funny. Me and Taz, you give me $100 now and I'll give you the stash tomorrow. Destroying cults. My question now is, do you currently partake with Mary Jane now? Yeah, I do. I'm a fan. I don't drink alcohol. I did for a while. It wasn't something that helped me in any way, and it made a lot of situations worse. So, I stopped doing that about almost, I think about 7 years ago now. And yeah, it's been so cool having it be legal here now. And we even have, you can get THC drinks. We've had that legal for a while, where you can get 5 milligram THC infused seltzer water and things like that. So that tends to be, if I'm kicking back, that's my drink of choice because I don't drink alcohol. And I like the seltzers because they don't have a bunch of sugar in them too. They make some good ones with juice, but so yeah, that's what we got going on over here. Pause for Andrea. Love your joke that you ended up explaining to AA Ron. By the way, you'd think he grew up in a cult or something. I do notice, and this is true for myself, that sometimes we're very literal. And I think that's in large part because of the type of training that we had to do. And there's a specific training that I know that Aaron and I both did. And I think that sometimes the result of that is you're just a little too literal. Plus, nobody's joking around so much in the C organization, especially. So sarcasm doesn't land the same way sometimes. But because I'm so literal, at times I don't get certain jokes, or at least that's what Tony says when I don't laugh at his jokes. You're so literal. Babe, sometimes it's just not funny. But I got to get better at, laughing even if it's not funny. I just sit there like and then he thinks I didn't understand it, so he'll start to explain it to me. Which does sometimes help. But yes, that was funny. Aaron, I had told him, and I'll share it with you guys. This is my one joke about, well, I won't set it up. I had said that sometimes in Hawaii, people suffer from lakanuki. It's a rare Hawaiian disease, which can only be cured with kamanawanalea. So hopefully you guys get that. Confident Chris. That's right. That was a guy's name. That is right. So hopefully you get that. Otherwise, I can explain it because it sounds like a Hawaiian word. That's what I had to explain to Aaron. Lakanuki, lack of nuki. Come on, I want to Leia. Come on, I want to Leia. Then he got it. But you're right. He grew up in a cult. I think no, the first time I heard it, I got it. But I'm also more familiar with Hawaiian, so I'm going to give him that. Give him that for sure. Yep, Rachel, you're right. You can't be everybody's cup of tea. Oh, you've been to Duke's. Heather said she's been to Duke's on Oahu. It's just so awesome. Well, you know what? I only go if Henry Capono's there. And it works out great because he does his show at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And I am not a night person. So if I want to do 1 a.m. stuff, it has to happen at 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. or, like maybe Henry's thing where you get there for his show at 4. But other than that, I'm just not a night person. Even in my younger days, I really wasn't so much. I'm a little bit more of a homebody. I love getting out during the day, and but I think I get more of my socialization tied to my job, people that I meet, networking, because you do a lot of fun, or I do a lot of fun things like that, things in my community that I'm involved in. And maybe that's why, because so much of my work is I really do get to spend time with. It's fun. Maybe I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not always fun. Sometimes it can be quite difficult, but for the most part, I enjoy it. So it doesn't always feel like work. And so when I get home, and also we kind of got into this habit because think about it, right? We had the pandemic going on for almost 2 years and, people weren't going out. And then it wasn't long after that when Tony got sick, and we didn't go out a ton before, especially after we stopped drinking. And, you just like, and we're in our 50s. Not that I mean, I know people much older than me who are going out all the time and they can stay out late, but I don't know. I love and I'm the same way on vacation when we go to Hawaii. Like I want to chill and do different things during the day, but I want to be in bed by 8, 9 o'clock, especially with the time difference. So yeah. And yes, Dip Me in Glitter. She says, don't forget, you and your sister need to do a follow-up song. I told her to get started on it because she's the more like the brains behind that operation and definitely the more talented one. Oh, Susie says, your son says the best dispensaries are in your state. Oh, must not be my state because in Minnesota, the only ones we have, there are some on a couple of reservations. They are kind of got a, got a jump on it, I guess, if you will. Lou Ann, that's awesome. You said you were clean and sober for 30 years, but love the weed for my pain. That's awesome. Good for you. That is so awesome. Hey, Robert, welcome. Cannabis versus Xanax is rather toke. Is rather toke. Oh, Cornelius, you have that's interesting. So you have Asperger's and had to learn sarcasm too. Yeah. It's I have sometimes wondered actually some of the traits of being on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum are similar to some of the behaviors of I would say a larger amount of people within this organization than I've met out in life since. When I got to learn more about what it meant to be on the spectrum and learn more about Asperger's and autism, I was like, wow. Because I have been questioned given some of my some of my quirks, if you will. Some of it, I had one doctor thought maybe that I had might have been on the spectrum. But in learning much more about my past and stuff, the behaviors and the effects of being in Scientology can be similar. And anyways, we didn't really pursue that further, but it got me thinking. There are quite a few people, especially in the C organization, if you've been raised in Scientology, who I would be suspicious if they were on the spectrum, which made me wonder, is the Sea Org an environment that kind of fosters or because it's so regimented, it's very regimented and in some ways very predictable, like your schedule is always the same. When you eat is always the same routines, the the de orient being very detail oriented, depending on your job, of course. But I thought, "Huh, I wonder, people who like" it's just interesting. I think there's something to it where it made me think, are people who are on the spectrum a little more drawn to that environment? I mean, who are in Scientology? I am not talking about people not in Scientology, but who are in Scientology and have some of the behaviors associated with being on the spectrum, because there are aspects of being in the C organization that would play into that. It just makes me wonder, like, is that a thing? I don't know. I need to talk to somebody who knows way more about that kind of stuff than me, but I think it is something worth exploring. Robert says his uncle's from Samoa. That's cool. That's very cool. Wow, he was going to be king, but he joined the Merchant Marines. Wow, that's a switch. That is a switch for sure. Is there anything you still do in your daily life that you did in Scientology that you like doing because you agree with it, or do you completely rebel or something? Um, I would say there are things that there are certain habits that I learned in the C organization that more had to do with discipline, and I don't mean in a disciplinarian way. I mean self-discipline, um, follow through. I have a really good work ethic, and people get that obviously outside of Scientology, but in my experience, especially C organization members tend to kind of take it to an extreme. Um, so I think, well, here's an example. Like one thing that you're trained on, even not in the C organization, if you're a staff member, but definitely in the C organization, L. Ron Hubbard says that you shouldn't have to handle something more than one time. So if I have, like, say, a dish and I decide, okay, it's dirty, but I'm just going to put it in the sink. I'll put it in the dishwasher later. Procrastination is a big, big, big no-no. If you have the dish in your hand, you put it immediately in the dishwasher. You touch it one time, you handle it one time, it's one motion. There's this obsessiveness with efficiency that is not a bad thing, right? Because who couldn't be more efficient? But when you are rigid about it, when you end up, when efficiency becomes more important than enjoyment, that's something that I probably still struggle with. It's good to be efficient, don't get me wrong, but sometimes my drive to be efficient about something overtakes my desire, is stronger than my desire to like relax and enjoy something. And that's where Tony comes in, and where my Tony is so amazing for me because he gets me to, oh, enjoy it. You should enjoy it. Encourages me in those ways. Um, but I feel like I still maintain, like I've learned I have to work really hard. I think most people do though, to maintain some sort of, your self-care, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And that's another thing, and probably why I'm so much happier the last couple years, because I finally twigged on that. And that is not something that's just because I was in Scientology. I know many people who don't make sure they take care of themselves. And I realized that, like, if I take care of myself, if I treat myself how I would like others to treat me, I'm better off. Like if I'm making sure I'm getting good sleep and I'm eating the food that I do better with eating, if I'm making, and I am slowing down enough to just have some downtime and enjoy and chill, then it balances out my work, because I do work a lot and I enjoy what I do. So it doesn't feel like it's just I work all the time, but I also take my downtime. Sometimes I feel like I have two speeds. I'm either going, 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 or I'm laid out in the recliner and nothing is happening. It's it's kind of like it's almost one or the other. So what I've done is I try to slow down a little bit and, like, okay, say I'm just even cleaning around the house. I don't need to do this whole think through, be so exact about it that, well, I'm going to do this in this sequence and do it this way because it's the most efficient way to do it. And I'm going to, even with decorating, right? Like, I like, sometimes I'm like, well, I don't want something out or a certain way because I'm like, it's just going to be harder to clean. So little things that, again, I think some of you could relate to who have never been in Scientology, but just like ramp that up, like maybe 5 times more, maybe even 10 times more is the intensity of what it can be like in the Sea organization. So yeah, that's something that I know I've had to continue to work on. Cornelius says, I have ADHD too. Maybe Scientology is a trap for people on the spectrum. Marty Rathburn is on the spectrum for sure. That's what I'm saying, is I think there's something there. And I think that it gets, well, one, Scientology doesn't acknowledge that there's such thing as being on the spectrum, but it gets used and almost manipulated in a way and used by this organization. Like, they know that with a certain environment, that there are a certain a type of person who would be more comfortable in that environment, but really it kind of hides some of the abuse and the mistreatment. It's just so interesting to me. It really is. I think I really want to talk to somebody who knows more about that than me. Did you already do a live with Shelby about the interviews you two did for the first time you publicly talked about Scientology? Yes. In fact, I think it's the first interview I did with Shelby, which you can find if you go on my channel and you hit the live button and it shows you the lives. I forget what the thumbnail looks like, but I think it was the How My Mom Saved Me from Scientology. I think that was the name of the video. And if I remember correctly, that's the one where she talked about when we did the interview with the Tampa Bay Times. And that was, I mean, I told people maybe I've read it twice, and the video's no longer on there that we did, but I couldn't even watch her video. I couldn't be in the room when she was even interviewed about it, because 1, I wanted her to feel completely comfortable, but Shelby told me when we talked about it during the live, she said, "I was fine with you being there." And then I realized, oh, that's what I told myself at the time, but really the truth was I didn't think I could handle, at that time. I had just left too, and that's why it's been 13 years and we are now having these conversations. I'm having conversations with my kids and my sister about our time in Scientology that we never have, that are being prompted by these videos, and then them coming and sharing as well. There's things my sister has kept secret for 35 years that she's just talking about as well. Kobe, I mean, the US military likes to take a blind eye to people on the spectrum when it benefits them. Yeah, exactly. That's what, you know what? There's the example that I should have used. That's exactly it. Robert says, I look like your cousins, girl. Although sometimes you're talking to each other. So but I'm just assuming that you were talking to me. Ian Rafalco is on the spectrum. He's here on YouTube and is Dr. Berg's son. Really interesting guy. Maybe you two could have a chat. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I did not know that about him. I'll have to take a look at that. It would be interesting to talk to somebody who was in Scientology and then later was diagnosed as being on the spectrum, because when you're in Scientology, that's just not going to happen. That's a little too close to getting to those pesky psychiatrists. And that's part of why it goes unhandled. It goes unacknowledged completely. Completely, completely, completely. Okay, so let's see here. You guys are so funny. Robert, yes, we must have these conversations. So Rachel says, I have ADHD too. I wonder what the Delphi school is like with ADHD, because in school, if I had an IEP with accommodations geared towards me, I think the Delphi school is one size fits all. It is. And I forget what IEP stands for, but I know it has to do with the accommodations that the school district will provide if you have a diagnosis of having ADHD. Um, so my daughter, my middle daughter, who you have not met yet, who will be coming on and doing a live, I think eventually. In fact, she will, because we just talked about it the other day. She got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, something she completely had going on as a child. And as a parent who's a Scientologist, it never even occurred to me, because it's not acknowledged that ADHD and mental illness diagnoses are real and valid things. And it's just, you have misunderstood words. You just need the study technology if you got that ADHD. And probably it's because you're distracted by all those squirrels. And we know how Scientology feels about squirrels. And it was something that after she went through her diagnosis, well, actually before that, when I left Scientology and started learning more about it, which I didn't right away. I did not learn a lot about ADHD until Tony. My Tony has ADHD, and I read a couple books about it, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh," like it really, my middle child really kind of to a T fit that, and it would explain so much of some of the things and struggles that we had when she was growing up. And I didn't leave Scientology till she was in college. So it was something that was diagnosed much later. And I've learned more about it. And it's interesting because the people closest to me in my life, if I had to think of really the closest to me that I spend the most time with, most of them have ADHD. And I don't know, maybe it's because I read those books that I found helpful. There was a Dr. Amen, Amen, who helped me understand it and give me some tools to be able to, communicate better and relate to them better and understand more how their brains work when certain things happen. So then I realized there's just like the more you know about anything, I think the better understanding you can have of it. And then you're not as reactionary towards it. You know, I might have personalized something earlier before and made it about me. And then when I understood more about ADHD, I realized, oh, okay, now I understand Tony more because I know that it just makes so much more sense to me. People make so much more sense to me who have ADHD when I started learning more about it. And so my heart really breaks for people in Scientology where that's not acknowledged because there's struggles that they don't need to be having. That's the thing. Because part of getting a diagnosis is being able to then have some tools to help to use. In many situations, the people closest to me who have ADHD are also some of the more brilliant people that I know, creative, outside the box thinkers. It's amazing. There's so many benefits, I think, as well. And at the end of the day, isn't it just it's all neurodiversity, right? Our brains work differently. We're not all one size fits all, like Delphi, which I think was the original question. It is not all and by the way, if I missed your question, please go ahead and pop it in there again. It well, you get what I'm saying. It's Delphi, anything Scientology with a study technology is a one size fits all. If you're showing, I remember once my middle daughter was on course at the org as a child, and I got called in because she wouldn't come out from under the table and she was being disruptive. And so much of that was she wasn't learning the way she needed to learn. And in Scientology, there is one way to learn, the way that L. Ron Hubbard tells you to learn. So the schools and things like Delphi are very much more that one size fits all. I would like to think that the teachers there, as you know, they become legit teachers and maybe, but see, they can't acknowledge the whole ADHD thing. So I don't know how they reconcile that. But I know they're not doing a service to the children that are there or acknowledging it. They just need to learn differently. We all learn differently. I love doing my continuing education for real estate online. I'd much rather do that than have somebody in front of me lecturing me. For me, that gets a little triggering with the whole how I grew up with my grandpa dad, who was like the cult leader of our family, and the lecturing, the sitting there and having him drone on for hours and not being able to get up or move, or doing training routines in Scientology where you have to sit there with your hands on your lap for hours at a time, facing somebody in front of you over and over and over again. So it's, yeah, it's just it's a really interesting topic, and I'm gonna love if you're catching this on the replay. I want to hear your comments too because I'm catching a lot of them in the live chat, and I think it's absolutely fascinating the ties that you guys are making as well. And I think it's interesting too that there's so many, late diagnoses. Late diagnosis. There's my Tony. He says ADHD can be a superpower if you know how to harness it, and I would agree with that. I have seen him do it. And I thought I read something recently that talked about how there was a survey done of, oh, what was it? I forget if it was like pilots. It was like all these jobs that were a little bit more, um, would be considered more high stress. And some of the people best at them were people with ADHD. I think it's just because when you have the right tools and you're allowed to have an ecosystem that works for you, then you thrive in that area. And it's not the same for everybody. If I have a day, as much as I love meeting people and doing what I do for a living, there's many times where I've had to go into my walk-in closet with, no windows, shut the door even, and just give myself a little bit of time to decompress. Or more so now, I do it in the bedroom. It's got like I have the hue bulbs where you can change the color. So I like to make it a very specific color of blue. And I have a humidifier in the wintertime. Even though there's a humidifier in the house, it never seems to be enough in the bedroom. I'll have that going and maybe a diffuser with a scent that I like. And so the lights are really low. I've got the curtains closed. And I find that just not having I need to come down from relax after like that level of stimulation with a lot of people. I love it, but well, I guess I'm an introvert in that I regain my energy and I recharge by being alone or being just me and Tony. And I have my job is very, you have to be extroverted, and I enjoy that. But if you introverts out there know what I'm talking about, it's just sometimes people are surprised to hear that, like I worked in radio and I do another podcast, that how could you be an introvert? Because no one's looking at me. I mean, you guys are, but I can't see you. It's words. And like I can speak in front of a ton of people. I'm actually fine with that. But being physically in a group of people, that's a little bit more difficult. And doing a big party or something like that, I would have to definitely have that time dimming the lights. And Tony knows. He it's creating that, if that's the ecosystem that I need to thrive in, right? Like, and that's what I'm saying when I talk about I've learned how I work so that I can take care of myself as well and create that environment and that time that I need to just kind of decompress. But that doesn't work for everybody. So it's finding what that is for you. Tony and I we have different ecosystems in how we find what we find relaxing, what we enjoy around us. I prefer I've had my kids tell me the bedroom looks like a VRBO. I don't like clutter. Um, and Tony likes to see things that he enjoys and that mean something to him. So he'll have a lot of stuff out. He kind of pretty much has done what he wants to do in our downstairs area. And upstairs, I kind of keep it a little bit more like how I like my ecosystem. And it's interesting to see the difference because they're very different. And I think it really depends on how your brain works, on which one you might enjoy more. Of my girls, Kelsey, my middle one who has ADHD, she loves it down there. She thinks it's absolutely great. And my other daughter, Shelby, it's not as much. She likes the more upstairs, what I would consider to be, just less things, or less. I don't want to call Tony's prized possessions clutter. You know what I mean, babe. He's here in the chat, so but yeah, so I don't even remember what that question was or how we got there. But he has a very interesting take on that whole thing. And I love what you guys are saying too about this. This is so interesting. I can't wait to read the comments later too as well. Um, Leaving Scientology, a Scientologist might argue, does knowledge of the ARC triangle prove helpful when dealing with ADHD? This isn't that a tool? Psychiatry has no tools except to restimulate. Okay, so ARC in Scientology, there is a triangle that L. Ron Hubbard did not create the triangle, but there's a triangle. And at the top is affinity. And then at the corners are reality and communication. So ARC is affinity, reality, and communication. And he says, and this is something that I believe to be a universal truth because it does make sense. And I've been able to experience this in life. It's not something he codified it a certain way and put it on the triangle. But if you want to increase your affinity, and all ARC together equals understanding. So if you communicate with people, as you communicate, it might raise your affinity and it'll raise your reality because you'll have more of an idea of who they are, where they come from, what they're doing. And so this concept in Scientology of the ARC triangle is, you raise one point, you can raise the other points, and the opposite can occur. So in Scientology, you'll hear them say, oh, we have great ARC. So that means we get along really well. We have a really good understanding of each other because they have good affinity, reality, and communication. So if you reverse that and you're having issues and you find yourself, maybe it's with your partner, that your affinity, your love for them is going down. Maybe it's just for that day or that hour or, hopefully not longer. How you can raise that is by increasing your communication. communicate again. Make sure you're communicating, and then naturally that reality and affinity comes up, and then you have better understanding. So in Scientology, that ARC triangle is a tool. As far as dealing with ADHD, you would try to find points, things that you could agree on. So let's take my daughter under the table. Yelling at her would not have worked. But fine, like, hey, why don't you, let her talk, communicate what's going on. And, she communicates and so on. But I don't think it's a tool specifically that, because, well, one, Scientologists don't necessarily acknowledge ADHD. But yeah, they think that psychiatry has no tools except to stimulate, because psychiatry is at the root of all of these problems that people have, is what Scientologists believe. Jess says, Natalie, I do that every day. LOL. I have difficulty with transitions. I used to think I was just an introvert, but now I know that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's so great when we can figure out what works for us, and it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. It might not make sense to them, like why I'm in my closet. We moved into a bigger place, so now I don't have to just be in the closet. I can There's a whole room I have set up, and I've learned what lighting works for me when I'm trying to relax. I love those light bulbs that you can just do the app on your phone and change the color. I'll have them brighter when I get home, but when I want to relax, I can change them to different colors. And I absolutely love that. And you're right, Remarch. People confuse introverts with shy. They are two very different things completely. I came to learn that too, because for a long time I was confused about, about that. How can I do enjoy speaking to people, but then I'm just so exhausted later if I have to be at a party or a function with a lot of people? And I instinctively wanted to just be in a smaller, darker, quiet place. And then I learned about that an introvert just means that you get your energy, you recharge more when you're alone. And people who are extroverts, they recharge around other people. I have this one friend during the pandemic, she almost lost her mind. And I remember her saying how upset she was and how hard it was and how depressing it was, because you couldn't go anywhere and couldn't go to dinner, couldn't go do all these things. And I remember thinking, I even told her, I'm like, well, her name's Jill. I'm like, Jill, I just don't understand that, because I'm loving this. I am a homebody. I am happy to be home. And it wasn't affecting me the same way. It got old after a while. Yes. But I didn't realize how hard it was for her till she told me. She said, look, how would you feel if you had to go to an event or function every single day with 50, 100 people, network the entire time, the entire day, without a break, without any of that time to decompress the way that you do, get in my closet? Um, how would you feel? And I was like, oh my gosh, I would feel exhausted. I would feel miserable. I would feel trapped. I don't like that feeling at all. And she said, that's how I feel, not being able to go out, not being able to be around people. I'm just drained. And finally I got it. And I went, oh, okay. So you do feel the same way I do. It's just the opposite. And knowing that is a real relationship saver, and understanding that, because she's a good friend of mine, but she doesn't see me a ton. And she's cool with that. We talk a lot. But a lot of the functions, especially in the evenings and stuff, because like I said, I sometimes do a lot of that during the day. But it was really great to be able to kind of put that together. How do you get over public speaking? Like in college class lecture, you become the lecturer. How do you get over public speaking? Picture everybody naked. I don't know. I think some people even from a young age, I think I was always more outgoing, and even though I recharge differently, I'm so curious about people. And especially since leaving Scientology, that I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if I ever had because I've done some public speaking and I'll get maybe like a little nervous, but once I get going, then I'm fine. And I think it's because I don't know, if I'm speaking, it's because I'm talking about something I'm genuinely interested in. Um, yeah, I don't know. That is a really good question. If ever anybody has some suggestions or tips for overcoming public speaking, if somebody struggles with that, by all means, jump in there. Yeah, Dip Me in Glitter says, I think we all chuckle when we hear Grandpa Dad. Yeah, you should. And for anyone who doesn't know, Grandpa Dad was my mom's third husband. You got to track with me. You might need to get a pen and some paper out. My mom was married to my biological dad, who's my dad. Then my mom married my first stepdad, who was Brian, who got her into Scientology and happened to also be a paraplegic who was an artist. He was a really good wood carver. 7 years into that marriage, my mom divorced him and married his dad. So the only person I knew was my grandpa because I hadn't been seeing my biological dad for years, or my grandparents became my dad. So when I would refer to him, like with my sister and the fam, it'd be like I would say, Grandpa Dad, just to kind of separate them out. Because then my mom got married a fourth time, and she was married to my last stepdad for over 20 years until she passed away. And yeah, so that's that. But Grandpa Dad makes me laugh too. Treasure Bloke, I have a cool recommendation for ADHD resources, which are hilarious. Can I email? Please do. Natalie@tonkatalk.com. I think I even added it to the channel somewhere. It might be in the description, but I realized that I should add that in there. Wow, you guys are so smart. I'm telling you, the whole neurodiversity in Scientology, especially the C organization, is an interesting topic. I feel like I should line up, a couple people to talk to about that. We should do a whole show about it. Sandy says, I'm an introvert extrovert. I prefer small gatherings. Same. I I love small gatherings. Like, I am more likely to go to your house if you're having some party selling something because they tend to be not as large, a little smaller. And I went to s- I but sometimes I do. I enjoy that better. But I find myself sometimes, I think the things I try and think like, you know what? My sister gave me a complex about this, and I'm going to talk to her about it. I got to remember this. Lana. Lana would often say before we would go to something, a function or something that where there were groups of people. Lana and I lived in the same area for a long time. So we would go to things together, and we'd be going in there, or maybe it was something kind of more in her world. And she would tell me, she's like, okay, don't be weird. Right before we go in. She told me this for years. She finally stopped. I think she just gave up because she realized that the weird is me. And there's just some things that, like, you just can't blame on a cult. We all have our quirks, and some things are because of being in a cult, but more for me, it's because I feel like I didn't get that time to be exposed to certain things and learn about it or hear about it or spend all this time sitting around with my friends and just talking. That just wasn't part of my life during some very formative years when it should have been. So sometimes when I get around a group of people small enough that you can actually have conversations too with people, I'm so curious and I want to know. And sometimes the things I want to know about are what many would call being too nosy. And because I'm comfortable talking about a lot of different subjects and topics, in large part because of being in Scientology, and they do training where they flatten your buttons, I need to remember that that doesn't mean the person I'm talking to is okay with it. And um, so I try to just be more conscious of like, okay. And because I'm so literal, if they're saying words that make it sound like they're comfortable, I'm more likely to believe that than I am their body language. But now because in the Sea organization, you're not allowed to show a lot of emotion. That's especially negative emotion. You can be angry if you're angry and yelling at somebody who is below you, but you can't mouth off to a senior or be disrespectful. And you can't show disappointment. You can't show, anger. You can't show, oh my gosh, grief, crying, anything like that. So it's like a default sometimes to just be a little bit more robotic. And that's something that I worked through and was shedding more of. But in the process, I realized like I may be a little bit more overly enthusiastic in my communication with people. And I'm curious about sometimes the simplest things. I went to a neighborhood thing recently and was just fascinated about this woman sharing this camping experience. And it was interesting because she went by herself and just all these other things about like in her garden and all this. And I had all these questions, but especially about the going camping by yourself. What made you want to do that? Had you done anything like that before? What did it feel like when you were there experiencing that for the first time? Were you concerned about your safety? I mean, I just grilled this woman because I'm really interested in other people. And I'm 53 years old. If I am fortunate enough to live to be 80 or 90, in many ways, I feel like, okay, that gives me 30 years. How am I going to cram in the things that I want to know, the things that I want to learn about? And that's why I love YouTube so much, because there's just so much knowledge there. There's so many different people. I feel like YouTube is like speed dating. You find creators that you like and you kind of try them out a little bit, but maybe you don't connect right away and you move on to another one. But then you find that one that you connect with and you establish a relationship and take things to the next level, right? You're kind of checking in on the channel more, you subscribe, you like the videos. It's a community, which I'm sure nobody can relate to, sometimes saying the absolute wrong things at a gathering. Grandpa Dad should be a superhero. Oh my gosh. I probably wouldn't, um yeah, I don't that kinda would be funny as a superhero, but I think there might be another role there. I'll have to think about it. Have you had a chance to look up Hubbard's false narrative about his World War II record by Chris Owens? It's called Ron the War Hero. Yeah, I did see some of that. Over the years, I found certain things, but, um and yeah, shocking. Like, surprised, not surprised, the way he lied about things. They never counted on the internet coming around. I'm gonna write that down though, because it's Ron the War Hero. Because I was thinking about his history. I wanted to do a video about some of the myths, and I couldn't remember exactly where that info was. So thank you, Nerman. Thank you very much. I will be looking that up again. Oh, Rachel, you can't even stand in front of a classroom. You start crying. Well, I hope you're going to get some good tips here. My advice, start small. Maybe do it in front of one person, maybe two people. I sometimes, when I'm a little bit nervous about it, I just realize that I'm communicating with these people. It's a two-way street. So I don't pretend they're not there. I want to see their faces and see if they're connecting with what I'm saying. And, um, I don't know. So maybe think about it like it's just a conversation, but with multiple people at the same time. Yes, me and Taz, that story never does get old. That is funny. And Nerman, you're right. Hubbard was not a World War II hero. Gosh, there was just so much false information on there. Oh, me and Taz, you're right. Jamie Mustard. I downloaded his book. I think I got it on audio. I need to get going on that. I think I'll get going on that this weekend. Super Pup. You're darn right. Yep, I can totally hear and visualize Lana saying that to you. I love watching you two interact. Thank you. Yeah, I finally had to tell her, I'm like, I don't know why you think even telling me that is going to change the outcome of this evening. things are going to be said and going to be talked about. So I think she just became more accepting and realizing too that it's just, you gotta take the good with the bad with people if you connect with them. And sometimes I'm gonna bring up things that maybe, but I also will I what I try to do now is preface it with, "You don't need to answer this if you don't want to, truly, but," and then boom, there's my question. And I don't think I've yet had anyone say, "No, I'm not comfortable talking about that." But at least I've learned that it's more polite to ask before I just ask a question that someone might not be fully comfortable with. I feel like I've had more experience with that. I stand alone. Aloha from Scotland. You've caught your first live at 2 a.m. Ooh, look at you here, 2 a.m. The other day, not long ago, I stayed up till midnight, which for me is like really late. I think it was even like 12:30. For some reason, I'm not able to do that as much on the weekend, but during the week when I need to be up early, and I'm an early riser, and I think that's why I don't stay up late because I don't sleep in. I even when I can sleep in, it's difficult for me to on the weekend, I'm often still up between 5 and 6. Maybe if I stay up, later than normal, I can, like, make it till 6:30. But I wake up and my brain's already going, and if I'm excited about the day, then I'm like a kid on Christmas morning, and I just wanna get going. But I also enjoy you know what it is, and I'm just realizing it now? I don't wake up early and jump out of bed and get going on the day in that way. What makes me wanna wake up early when I wake up, and I think like, "Oh, I rather almost wake up early and do what comes next than go back to sleep for another hour." That is some of my favorite time is in the morning when I wake up. I get a cup of coffee, I get to snuggle next to Tony. That's a lot of times when I'm going through the comments and responding to them, or maybe I watch a show. It's just I will just putz around on my phone or, if I'm hanging out with well, usually Tony's falling back asleep. But I enjoy that time. It's quiet, Odin, our dog, he's quiet. It's still dark outside. I like waking up to have that time. I don't like the idea of waking up and then having to immediately go jump in the shower and get going. So I don't mind waking up early to ease into my day that way. But sometimes it's ridiculously early. Donnie Lee, are you following the TikTok live streaming protesters at the LA, California, USA Scientology Recruitment Center? Absolutely. Yes. I love watching William's channel. I watched last night, but I guess it depends on the time. They're probably out there now, but I do try to follow along with that. Dip me in glitter to help with, the speaking in public. Just pretend they're in their underwear and they are superheroes. Oh my gosh. Oh, Luann, you got ordained and only do small weddings and get over your stage fright. That's a good idea too. And yes, Tammy, early mornings are the best. I completely agree. Well, again, remember to subscribe if you guys have not already and hit the like button. I would absolutely love that. If you're on the replay, share your comments on all of this because I'm going to be in there reading them. I need to get caught up on my comments and my responses. Um, And remember, we learned a Hawaiian word today, and do not let me forget. I want to do Aloha Friday every week, and I'm thinking you guys tell me too. Like I'm thinking 6 or 6:30, a little bit later than I do some of my lives during the week. And that's Central Time, so that's, Minnesota time. So wherever you are at that time. Let me know what you think about that on Fridays, sticking with it like 6:30. Um and in addition to it being like a Q&A, I want to definitely share a Hawaiian word with you too, because it is Aloha Friday after all. And this week we talked about the word was pakalolo, which is Hawaiian for cannabis, because we were talking about it, which made me remember the word. And there you go. Treasure Bloke, thank you for sending the email. I will look for that. And yeah, a new word every Friday. I'm glad you like that. Jess, I'm glad you like late nights. It's so not me. Once in a while, though, once in a while, if I'm up, I'm like, oh, this is actually almost like the morning time. It's quiet. It's really dark out. I like that too. I like that a lot. So it is Friday. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I will be back tomorrow doing a live. And yeah, let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Whatever the questions you have, if we didn't get to them, we can get to them another time too. Enjoy the rest of your cult free day.